Hello, I'm Sheriff Bill Brown, bringing you this edition of the Sheriff's Roundup from the Allen Hancock College Law Enforcement Training Facility, where our custody and sheriff's deputies receive intensive training and instruction in tactics, laws, and professional decorum that is the foundation of their careers. In previous editions of the Roundup, we've shared footage of recruits making their way through this very academy. And today we'll introduce you to one of our custody team members who, years ago, had his start at this academy. Also in this edition of the Roundup, we will reflect with retired Sheriff Jim Thomas about his time as sheriff, recap mutual aid assistance that we recently provided to Lahaina in Maui, Hawaii, in the aftermath of their deadly and tragic wildfire, and close out with a remembrance of the life and work of retired Sheriff's K-9 Douge, who recently passed away. In the last two editions of the Sheriff's Roundup, we've shared what to expect when you apply for a career with the Sheriff's Office and what the first days and weeks as a custody deputy are like, both from the trainer and the trainee perspective. Now, we'd like to share how the training and preparation that our team members gain here at Allen Hancock College translates into a meaningful profession. Here to share with you what his experience has been like is Sergeant Eric Alexander.
My name is Eric Alexander. I'm a custody sergeant here at the Santa Barbara Main Jail. I grew up in Los Angeles. In 1990, I joined the Army. I was a cavalry scout. I went to Operation Desert Storm, got out of the Army, and my wife suggested, well, you take the military, kind of roll it up, you got yourself a cop. So I figured, all right, I'm going to start applying for different law enforcement agencies in the area, and I've been here ever since, and I've enjoyed it tremendously. I applied for the SORT team, the Special Operations Response Team. I was successful in joining that group, and that was very fulfilling to me. After SORT, I promoted to Senior Custody Deputy, and then I promoted to Custody Sergeant. This is a career that you put your work in, and you will move through the ranks. You can be as successful as you want to be. Your career is going to be as interesting as you want it to be. As far as collaterals, I'm currently with the underwater search and recovery teams. That's a great one. I enjoy that tremendously, especially working with deputies from across the street, from here in custody. We have volunteers on the team. It's a very interesting cross-section of the agency. I do feel that this is a rewarding job. I feel that at the end of the day, when I go home, I feel that I have accomplished something for my partners, for the community. I think that it's an important job. And I think it's an honorable job, and it's a job that has a lot of integrity. But most importantly, the thing that keeps me coming back is my partners. You develop a deep bond with the folks that you work with. We are providing inmates with tools that they will need to re-enter society. I know that in my almost 16 years here, I've seen very few inmates that have gone away to state prison for life without parole. So that tells me that most inmates are coming back out to the community at some point in the future. We know that. We try to prepare them for that eventual return to their families, to their communities, to the job market, things like that. And we have a robust discharge planning unit that tries to make that transition as seamless as possible.
Thank you, Sergeant Alexander, for sharing your experience with us and for the all-star work that you and your team do every day in our custody facilities. The Sheriff's Office has career openings in custody where you can work alongside highly motivated, good people in an environment where you can have a lasting impact in the community that you serve. If you or someone you know is interested in a career in law enforcement and corrections, I encourage you to take a look at the amazing opportunities we have available here in scenic Santa Barbara County at sbsheriff.org. I recently sat down with retired Sheriff Jim Thomas to reflect on his career with the Sheriff's Office and to capture the history of our agency through the lens of a previous leader. We spent the day at his home in San Ynez Valley, looking through pictures and memorabilia, and we talked about the changing landscape of law enforcement in Santa Barbara County and the U.S. Let's take a look at part of that conversation. Jim, thank you for joining us today to tell us about some of your experiences and to reminisce about your time as Santa Barbara County Sheriff.
Thank you, Bill.
Jim, let me start just by asking you to tell us a little bit about your early background. You had an interesting upbringing. Your father was in the U.S. Navy, a naval aviator.
He was a private pilot, when the war broke out. So The Navy, they were looking for private pilots to be instructors, so he became an instructor. Started with what they called the SNJ, and he flew for the entire war. He was an instructor and ended up at Bunker Hill, Indiana with a squadron of instructors. And then he ended up getting picked up by Chrysler Corporation early on, and he spent the rest of his life going through the chairs and so forth of Chrysler Corporation. And of course, we moved pretty much every year and a half. So I went to 5 high schools in 4 different states. In 1968, we were in Montclair, and I went on a ride-along with a guy by the name of Floyd Yates, and he was in a station wagon, had a dog in the back named Andrew. So we spent all night going in the alleys and checking doors, and he let me use the spotlight. So that was kind of fun, so I did it again, and then I did it again, and then I thought, you know, this is really something I want to look at, and I became a reserve. And I was a reserve for maybe 6 months, 8 months, and decided that's what I wanted to do with my career. And so got the guts to tell Dad I didn't want to be in the car business, and became an officer with Montclair.
You went up through the ranks. You were deputy sheriff, sergeant, lieutenant. You married. You had 4 children and 9 grandchildren between then and now.
2 great-grandchildren.
Oh, 2 great-grandchildren as well. That's wonderful.
Yep.
When you got elected for sheriff, you appointed Dave Dorsey as your undersheriff.
I did.
He was the existing undersheriff for Jim Vizzolini. He had supported Jim Vizzolini in the election, and my understanding is he came to you and said he would like to be your undersheriff, and you appointed him. And that's something that not a lot of sheriffs would do. And tell us about that, why you did it, and how that worked out.
He was the best man for the job. Finance has never been my forte, and he was a financial whiz. And so for that 12 years that we worked together, he got us through the budget process, and it wasn't something I even had to worry about.
You had one of the most unique experiences of any sheriff that I've ever known, and that is that you were also the fire chief for a couple of years.
The board came and said, would you consider going into the fire department for a while and trying to help straighten things out, because they were going to dismiss the fire chief. And I said, well, sure, I'll give it a try. And so ended up being 3 years. I would spend my mornings at the sheriff's office and my afternoon at the fire department. And that was a real unique experience, because as you know, fire guys and law enforcement guys are 2 different breeds. And you almost had to change your hat when you're going from one to the other. But I really, really enjoyed it. So that was lucky for me and lucky for them, I think.
Another great success that you had under your leadership in the sheriff's office at the time was a tremendous number of women who were promoted and took leadership roles at the management, the command, and even the executive level of the organization. Tell us about that.
It was easy. They were the best candidates. You know, and when I started in law enforcement, probably when you started in law enforcement, there weren't a lot of women there. But we had Terry Bunn and Deb Linden, a number of great women.
At one point, I think you had the highest number of women in leadership of any sheriff's office in the state. So
we did.
What was the most difficult or challenging part of being sheriff for you?
Having to let somebody go who probably had a good heart but bad judgment. There are times, and you know, that we're responsible to our community, and the people that we have, you know, they carry guns, they can take people's lives. It's an awesome responsibility that I think only you, me, and the others that are sat in that chair can fully understand. It's a burden, but it's not for everybody. But I think Santa Barbara County has been fortunate.
What are you proudest of during your time as sheriff?
My people. They did good work.
They did, and they continue to do. That's a great organization, and the most valuable thing in any organization are the people, right? If you invest in the right people, they develop more people behind them as well. And I think that's really shown that that's happening.
And I think also there were times, and you can relate to this, that I was able to advance, for example, the aviation unit and Northwest jail portion and so forth. And you finally got, you know, a jail built that 3 sheriffs tried to do and couldn't get done. So having those goals of making the organization better is something I think all of us as sheriff.
Well, thank you, Jim Thomas, for this time together, for sharing your notable career highlights with us, and most of all, thank you for your service as sheriff and throughout your law enforcement career to the people of Santa Barbara and California. We appreciate it very much.
You as well.
Thank you, Sheriff Jim Thomas, for your service to the county and for sharing your wisdom and your thoughts from throughout the years. Next, we'll hear from Lieutenant Jarrett Morris, who was recently deployed to Maui, Hawaii, in the aftermath of the catastrophic Lahaina wildfires. Lieutenant Morris responded to assist with the somber task of identifying decedents using the Andy Rapid DNA system.
At the end of August, I was requested by the California Office of Emergency Management to deploy to Lahaina, Maui, to help them with the recent wildfires that they had just had, where at the time they suspected over 1,000 people had perished in the fire.
We're in the ocean.
The request for my deployment was to bring our rapid DNA instrument and set up a rapid DNA system to help identify those who had perished. When someone is severely burned, it's very similar to what we did in the Conception boat fire. It's very hard to identify them. The only viable option is DNA. And so with the rapid DNA instrument, once we have a family sample, we can identify somebody within 90 minutes. And so it's a very viable, quick system to help us identify those that are otherwise unidentifiable and get them back to their family to reunite them and help with the grieving process. So that was really my main job, was trying to find familial samples and working with the community, working with government officials, religious leaders to try to get those familial samples. It was very difficult due to culture and tradition in Hawaii to even convince them that this is okay and this is what they need to do to help identify their loved ones. I was able to go out to community meetings. I did PSA infomercials for Maui County Police Department, explaining what we're doing. Being able to go out in the community and help an area of the country that I'm not from and be culturally sensitive to them and help them understand and work with them. It was hard, very hard, but it was very rewarding. So when I left Maui, we had identified approximately 77 of the 97 known decedents. Being part of the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office, I've been involved in numerous wildfires, the Montecito 1-9 debris flow, the Conception boat fire, the Isla Vista shooting. I've never seen anything like this. Lahaina was devastated. The fire blew through Lahaina in a very short period of time. It was just something I've never seen before. It was devastating.
Thank you, Lieutenant Morris, for representing our agency with professionalism and compassion, and for helping to provide closure to families experiencing such heartbreaking loss. In our final segment in this roundup, we'll be honoring one of our recently retired canines, Dougie, who passed away after a long and remarkable life. Here to tell you all about him are two of his handler partners, Sergeant Brian Flick and Deputy Dennis Thomas.
My name is Dennis Thomas. I'm a school resource deputy and senior deputy with the Sheriff's Department. Dougie was a dog that the narcotics unit purchased so he could search out and find narcotics and be used as a tool. Dougie was a very young dog when he came in, and him and Detective Flick went through extensive training together, which is very normal for a canine handler and his dog to get to know each other and learn to work together.
He was raised by puppy raisers, and he was actually supposed to be a seeing eye dog. He didn't quite make it. He wasn't cut out for it. So he was a little too rambunctious, so he kind of flunked out of that program. They were going to try to use him as a search and rescue dog, but his legs were kind of bowed in the back, so flunked out of that program again, and then we got him.
And after that process, Dougie was seamless. He came right into our unit and made us laugh and just had a way to do his job and keep us on our toes.
Very, very playful, and that was what made him such a good narcotics dog. He was responsible for quite a few finds. He was more like a cat. He was able to just jump onto countertops and wiggle around objects, and he was just an amazing dog. We had a pretty special bond. I mean, he went with me everywhere. But at the time I had small kids, and my kids loved him, and he was a work dog and he was an asset to the department, but he was also, one of my good friends. I had Dougie for about 4 years, and he went on to have an amazing career after me.
I was just kind of told, like, hey, would you be willing to take him? And of course I was like, yeah, absolutely. I love that dog. After training with him, we just became buddies. and he was super special to me. He became very special to my family, and as we worked through narcotics for a couple years, we made a lot of good finds, and he did a really good job. So when I was transferred to the school, it was always planned that Dougie would come with me, just as some sort of emotional support animal. And it was just a game changer for me and for the schools.
I think it's really important that schools have resource deputies. Deputy Thomas, he actually came last year bringing his dog, and everybody loved his dog. And so I think that was like good for us.
Those kids would see Dougie and automatically be drawn to him, which would then give me an opportunity to get to know some of those kids. And so often when kids were in crisis at school, I always told them, when Dougie's here, you're welcome to come into my office and take him out, lay with him, sit with him, play with him, whatever you want to do. And that was what was special about him. He and I had a really strong bond from the beginning. Anytime I was sick, anytime I wasn't feeling good, he was right next to my bed. But no matter what, he was with me all the time. So the end of his time, I knew that that dog was so loyal to me that I also needed to be loyal to him, and I made sure that I was, as much as I could, was with him during the times that he was struggling. It was clear on the last day when I found him that he was dying, and so it was a bad day, and I had to take him in, and they told me he had cancer and he needed to be put down. We had eye contact, and you could just tell he knew that he was going to be all right. I knew he was going to be all right, but it was hard. So.
Thank you, Sergeant Flick and Deputy Thomas, for sharing your memories of Canine Dougie. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Sheriff's Roundup. Thank you for tuning in and for supporting us as we serve and protect you.